The Phillies and especially the New York Mets have been really busy in the last couple days. Do the Braves need to respond, and do they do it by adding a starter? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into a special live edition of Braves Today here on Friday, January 23rd. This is your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. I want to get to your questions. Quite a few of you have already sent them in via social media, but those of you who are here live on YouTube, go ahead and drop your questions if you have them into the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to them at the end of the show. But before I do that, I want to talk about this idea that Atlanta needs to respond to the Mets and what that would look like. We talked about this on the show yesterday, obviously. The Mets have been very busy, right? They go out and they get Bo Bichette. They go out and they get Freddie Peralta. They trade for Luis Robert. And a lot of people are wanting, Alex Anthopoulos to make a move to kind of respond to what the Mets have done. We talked yesterday on the show about how it feels like the Mets are kind of becoming the favorite in the eyes of a lot of the national media, the projection systems, the sports books, and all of that. And I'm not 100% sure that the idea of that is the right way to approach this, right? It's a situation where the Braves have a very good team. And just because Atlanta's moves didn't happen at the same time as New York's moves doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go out and make a move in response. I think you can make the argument here that when you look at the way that New York made their moves, right? When you look at and saw how they pivoted very quickly to Bo Bichette when they missed out on guys that they thought they were going to get, that these aren't necessarily the best deals from their perspective, right? From the Mets' perspective. They're paid a lot of money for Bo Bichette. He had a qualifying offer, but he has opt-outs. So they could be giving up draft picks for only one season of Bo Bichette. Similar to what happened with Boston and Alex Bregman. It feels like they were a little bit of panicky moves. But I also do think if Atlanta were to make a move, it would still be going after a starter. And we played the clip on here. We talked about this ad nauseum at this point. Alex Anthopoulos said, if you want an impact starter, if he wants to add a starter, it needs to be an impact starter. And he didn't define what impact means. I chose to interpret that at the time as a guy that would allow you, that would be one of your starting pitcher options in the postseason, right? If you go into game 3 of the postseason, you've already thrown Chris Sale. You've already thrown Spencer Schwellenbach. You would legitimately be saying, are we doing this as, are we throwing Spencer Strider? Are we throwing this new addition? Who is going in game 3? And if you just go off of that definition, there's not really a lot of options left on the market. You could look at Framber Valdez or Zach Gallen. We've talked about both those guys at length. Valdez has, the clubhouse concerns. We know Atlanta's big into those. We saw him cross up as catcher. He's still on the market. Zach Gallen was not that good last year. We don't really know what the reason for that was either. But since both those guys turned down qualifying offers, Atlanta would have to give up their second highest draft pick to sign them. And because of where Atlanta's picks land, because Drake Baldwin won Rookie of the Year, it would be pick number 27. It would be a $3.5 million bonus pool that would be given up. I went back and checked, and from what I can find, That would be the highest pick ever sacrificed for a qualifying offer player. By comparison, the Phillies would lose pick number 64. The Dodgers are sacrificing pick 104 as their second highest pick for Edwin Diaz. Like it's much more punitive for the Braves than it is for other guys. So if you take them out, there's a couple names here for impact players. Correction, it's pick number 26, not 27. Thank you for that, Mass Boost in the chat. I got that wrong, I think, on the newsletter as well. There's a couple options here. The first one, and my good buddy Jake Mastriani from Locked On Braves, who thinks I should have him on here more often. He said good-looking fella from the postcast. I thought he was talking about me, but apparently he's talking about himself. Did a really good show, I think it was last week, talking about adding Chris Bassitt. And I know there's a big section of the fan base that has been pushing Chris Bassitt a lot, actually. I'm not opposed to the concept of Chris Bassitt. I do think you probably have to redefine impact, though, right? Because he's not automatically going to be a postseason caliber starter for you. He probably would be fine in the postseason, right? If you chose to start him in the postseason, I'm sure it would go okay. But he's not doing that thing Alex Anthopoulos said, where he wants the impact starting ad to push everybody down a spot, right? He's not automatically bumping everybody else down and being your game two guy behind Chris Sale. But what Chris Bassitt does let you do, and again, Jake made a lot of great points on this. He went a lot more detail than I did, so go check out that episode of Locked On Braves. Chris Bassitt has a career 3.64 ERA and 4 straight seasons of 30 or more starts. Now, I know that pitchers are healthy until they're not. Just because he has 4 straight seasons of 30 or more starts doesn't mean he's going to automatically do it again, right? We saw that with Aaron Nola. I talked about this yesterday. But the idea behind Chris Bassitt and adding Chris Bassitt is he gives you an arm that is more likely than your Ronaldo Lopez or your Grant Holmes or somebody else to be able to take the ball every 5th day and get you through the regular season. And the impact here, he may not automatically profile as a game 2 starter in October, but the impact you would get would be being able to put Chris Bassitt on the lineup card every 5th day for the entire season. And using off days, bumping guys back for extra rest, you then give rest to a bunch of your postseason guys, to your Chris Sale, to your Spencer Schwellenbach, to your Spencer Strider, to your Ronaldo Lopez, so that you lessen their workload throughout the regular season. We saw this in 2024. I talked to Alex Anthopoulos about this back in November. They can't do a 6-man rotation all year. It's not sustainable in the with MLB's current roster rules. But they can replicate some of the effects by using spot starters, by pushing guys back, taking advantage of off days and all of that stuff. And so the thought for me would be, if you get a guy like Bassitt, if you need him in the postseason, you could use him as a starter. But the other approach to take is you have him pitch every 5th day. If Bryce Elder ends up in the rotation, same thing. You have him pitch every 5th day. And in essence, you're pushing some of the workload off of your postseason guys onto these guys so that you can get the postseason guys to October healthy. Now, the question here is, I don't know how much he would cost, right? Chris Bassitt made $22 million in each of the last 2 seasons. And while he was injured late in the year last year, he also pitched well enough to argue for a similar salary in 2026. And the issue that Atlanta has, we talked about this, I think it was last week, from a CBT perspective, you're already at just under 259 million. And the third CBT tier, which is the one that Atlanta has said they are not going to go over because they don't want their draft pick to get moved back, is 284. So you have about $25 million of flexibility right now. with Atlanta wanting to save $10 million for the trade deadline as a contingency fund, that leaves you with less money than you were hoping. Like if you sign Bassett and he does get that full salary, that $22 million he's looking for, you are almost out of money. And to have available funds for the trade deadline, you really have to do something like move an Aaron Bummer or find some other way to cut payroll if you want to have funds available for the trade deadline. I'm not saying that you can't add him. I'm saying that adding Chris Bassett at full freight at what he was making last season really puts you into a hole of you need everybody else to stay healthy because you don't have the money to make additions at the deadline, right? The other option here, I talked about this a little bit on Friday morning in the newsletter, is Lucas Giolito could be somebody who would benefit from working with Jeremy Hefner. He had internal brace surgery in 2024, came back for the Red Sox last year, had a 3.41 ERA. That was an overperformance, right? He had a 4.17 FIP, a 5.06 expected ERA. But he missed the end of the season with some elbow soreness. Now, all reports we have now are that he's healthy. He's finished his throwing program. But I think that there is some tweaks that Jeremy Hefner could make to Lucas Giolito to get him closer to postseason territory, right? You could see something. He's a 4-pitch guy, right? 4-seamer, slider, changeup, curveball. It's a very good curveball, and he doesn't throw it enough. There are some very obvious changes. Have him throw that more often. He only really throws it in 2 strike counts. Get him to use it earlier in at-bats, right? He also predominantly only throws it against lefties. Get him to throw it a little bit against righties as well. He only throws a 4-seamer. Add in the other 2 missing fastballs, obviously the sinker and a cutter. We knew I was going to ask him to throw a cutter. He used to throw a sinker. He's done a little bit in the past. So go ahead and get that in there as well. Being able to do some of those changes, right? I mean, the curveball was one of his best pitches by Stuff Plus. He threw it 3% of the time last year. Ramp that up a bit. That's a very common Atlanta development thing that they do with pitchers is, hey, you have an outlier breaking ball. We're going to have you throw it a lot more. So there's a couple options there. Also with Lucas Giolito, here's the other part too. He made $18 and $19 million the last 2 years. And MLB Trade Rumors, when they did their predictions on free agents and salaries and teams, they had him making $32 million across 2 years. So $16 million a year. Little bit cheaper there. And somebody who, even coming back from TJ, he was able to give you some pretty decent innings. Give Boston some pretty decent innings last year. And it feels like he's just a couple of tweaks away from maybe being a postseason guy. You do have some other options outside of those, right? You can go for veteran starter, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. Sweepy here in the chat has a mention of maybe something like a Nestor Cortez on a minor league deal. Would give you another lefty, which would be interesting. He's not been as good recently as he was earlier in his career, right? 2024 with New York was his second really good year. Full slate of 30 starts, 3.77 ERA. Back in 2022, he was an all-star with a 2.44 ERA, although his FIP was almost a full run higher. But another idea of a guy that is probably in a minor league deal at this point. And I think that's ultimately where you're going to end up being, right? I think at this point, given the money that most of the other additions are going to require, you trade for Pablo Lopez, he's making $22 million. You trade for Luis Severino, he's making $20 million this year with a player option after that. You're probably in the position of grabbing a starter like a Nestor Cortez on a minor league deal and giving them a chance to earn a spot in spring training, or stashing them in Gwinnett and giving them a chance to come up, having them be one of the first players to come up before you start promoting prospects, right? In just a few minutes, let's talk about some of the other potential impact moves that the Braves might make. And then I want to answer your questions. Again, I've got some of them here from social media, but if you're in the chat and you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in. We'll make sure we get to those a little bit later in the show. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby here. We talked about impact moves, and every conversation goes to starting rotation because we know the Braves, have expressed a desire to add to the starting rotation. But I think there's a couple other options here as well, right? I don't think it's just starting pitching if you want something. If you look at the bench right now, your bench is Eli White is your primary outfield backup. Jorge Mateo is your primary infield backup. You have some catcher, right? It could be Sean Murphy. It's probably not. It's probably going to start the season off being a Sandy Leon or Chadwick Tromp or whatever. You do technically have one more spot on the bench. And this is obviously assuming that both Yastrzemski and Profar are in the lineup, one at DH and one in left field on opening day. You have one more spot in the lineup. And so the question becomes, do you look for something specific from that spot? You don't necessarily have to find a lefty for the bench simply because your starting lineup on opening day will have 4 lefties and 2 switch hitters. But I do think there's a place to look for some sort of power off the bench. You can go find somebody who can be a big bat for you. We've had the conversation before. I'm not opposed to the concept of bringing back a Marcell Ozuna, provided he's healthy and provided it's a cheap deal. You absolutely could discuss bringing him back. He is very good in the clubhouse. Multiple guys, pitching, hitters, all of that have talked about how Marcell helped them through struggles last year. If you're looking for impact, you could do something like that. I saw somebody suggest Justin Turner. He would be the absolute, probably the oldest ad you could make outside of pitching. He's 41 right now. He turned 41 back in November, but he's got experience at both first and third base. Would give you another very interesting option to add to your bench. Veteran pinch hitter, somebody who could maybe help out a little bit here and there at third base. If Austin Riley has another injury, you could go for somebody who was, a more of a power profile. You could go for somebody who was a catcher. I know that Mitch Garver, I believe, is still available. Seattle had previously signed him to kind of do a lot of DH stuff. There are a couple catchers and things like that out there. I do think your issue here, that final spot on the bench, a lot of the value from these guys is going to be either in certain pitch hit situations, or it's going to be the things that we kind of can't quantify. And part of me wonders, do you just take this final spot and give it to a vibes guy, right? Do you give it to somebody who is there to give you benefits in the clubhouse, the things that we don't see on an everyday basis? So that you may see Atlanta make a signing, and it might not make a lot of sense from a baseball perspective. I do kind of wonder about that. I am at the point right now. I'm going to get to your question in just a second. I'm at the point right now. I don't necessarily think you need to make any major ads. I think your response to New York making all these ads in the last week is maintaining the flexibility to pivot in any direction you need to. Had Ha-Seong Kim stayed healthy and you knew you were going to have him and you had a pretty well-rounded lineup, I could buy the argument of, hey, let's go out and throw some money at a starter and go to spring training. But the fact that you already lost a piece that you were counting on in 2026 to a fluke non-baseball injury tells me that rather than responding to the Mets just to respond, The better thing to do is probably to stand pat and have the flexibility to pivot if spring training gets here and you get a bad health update on Sean Murphy, or you get a bad health update on Joe Jimenez, or one of the starters goes down. I think having the flexibility, not making a move now, and having the flexibility to pivot and do something else when prices come down in spring, right? Guys, the closer we get to spring training, certain guys who are unsigned, like a Giolito, like a Bassett, like a Ozuna or anybody else, they're going to get cheaper to sign because they want jobs. They want to be able to get into spring training and get to work. They don't want to be worried about trying to sign and then being behind. So there is something to the thought process of just be patient. Because one, you can get values, but then two, it gives you flexibility to respond to bad news. And I think EK Wipes here in the chat puts it a great way. Making moves for the sake of making moves is how Bo Bichette gets $42 million. I think what's even bigger is making moves for the sake of making moves is how you end up giving up 2 draft picks and paying Bo Bichette $42 million a year just for him to leave after year 1. I think that's absolutely the right way to look at this. And I believe, and Joseph Benson said this really well. The trades have been very expensive. We've seen the Mackenzie Gore trade, which somebody asked me on the newsletter, did Atlanta make an offer there? We don't know anything official on that. We don't know if they did or they didn't. AA's very thorough. He frequently checks in on these things, but that was very much a quantity trade that Atlanta still really couldn't meet because there was a lot of position players in there. The Peralta trade, talked about this yesterday. That was 2 very good prospects in the public ratings. The equivalent deal for Atlanta with them not having a position player would have been J.R. Ritchie and Cam Caminiti. And I didn't want to do one of those without an extension, never mind both, right? So, all right, go ahead and drop your questions in here. I've got a couple real quick while I'm grabbing these. Going to the social media ones that I saved real quick here. Who do I see as our breakout rookie this year? And I do think something, and I've written about this recently, for not having a good farm system, Atlanta absolutely has pretty consistently sent a prospect to the majors just about every year who has been impactful. Drake Baldwin obviously won Rookie of the Year. Schwellenbach was very good in 24. Michael Harris won Rookie of the Year. Strider was a runner-up, etc. You good, Bandit? Yeah. This one is a little bit tough because you're even more veteran-laden than before. I think if you end up having a breakout rookie, it's going to be a pitcher. And I'm going to go with either J.R. Ritchie or Didier Fuentes. Fuentes, from a stuff plus perspective, is one of the best pitchers in the minor leagues. His stuff is fantastic. He's just really struggled with knowing where it is going. And if he took that offseason leap that we're all expecting, then it's very possible, since he's already on the 40-man roster, if they determine he's made that leap, they can bring him up and they can and he can get some extended runway to produce in the majors. I think Richie's stuff is very good. The problem for Ritchie is he's not on the 40-man. So to add him, you have to subtract somebody else. And so because of that, I really feel like it's going to take a little while to see a guy like Ritchie because it requires sacrificing something to get him. There's a note in here, big on Giancarlo Lara. That's from Sweepy. I do think that Lara is very talented. I still think at the end of the day, and I think Atlanta's acknowledged this as well, his ultimate place is going to be reliever. And it's very, very hard for a rookie reliever to get attention in Rookie of the Year race and to win it. He could still be a breakout guy, though. The question was a breakout guy. So he could still be a breakout guy. Question here from EK Wipes, the star of the show here. What do you think of a Chris Sale 1-year extension for $25 million? Breaks the $22 million cap for a great leader and a Cy Young winner. I think the best way for Atlanta to exceed the Atlanta max of $22 million that I've been calling it is to give it to one of the team's leaders. And it feels like they think the same way because Freddie Freeman, that was what they were going to do. The first player AA was going to pay over $22 million on a multi-year deal to was at the time the longest tenured Brave in Freddie Freeman. So I do think paying Chris Sale something like $25 million, I am okay with going over the $22 million cap, one, period. But two, doing it for a guy that is really your veteran leader in the clubhouse on the pitching side. He's one of the guys that always comes out and talks to the media and is one of the leaders of the group. So I think that's a perfectly fair thing. I would love to put another club option on there as well. Maybe $25 million with a $25 million club option. But that also establishes, hey, Atlanta is willing to exceed $22 million. Free agents can see that. Ronald can see that. It gives you a little bit of runway there. So I do think that's a very good idea. I would be willing to do something like that as well. Question on social media from Eddie. Excluding Joe Jimenez, are the Braves pitchers all having a normal offseason, or is there anybody else rehabbing from injury that we know of? So the last direct answer we got on something like this was from Alex Anthopoulos right at the winter meetings when he told us that they have great health reports on everybody. And usually it's not like that. Usually they get told, hey, this guy's having soreness in off-season workouts. We're concerned about this, et cetera, et cetera. So to our knowledge, Schwellenbach rehabbing the broken elbow. He was throwing back in December, normal offseason for him. Grant Holmes was feeling very, very good. Normal offseason for him as much as you can coming off a partial UCL tear. Ronaldo Lopez was throwing in season. He just wasn't able to get the point where they could bring him back. He is supposed to be on a normal offseason as well. I haven't heard anything specific on any of the other relievers having issues other than I've been told Aaron Bummer is not feeling pain and he should be fine on the shoulder issue he had late last year. I do think that may have also been part of the result of some of his lower velocity. Didier Fuentes, the shoulder injury that he had, I've been told that he is going to be fine. The question will be when. They don't think it's anything severe. They don't think it's anything that's going to hamper him into the season, but that he's not 100% right now. So that's the other reason why I don't know if he would be able to be a breakout rookie, because how much work was he able to do on the baseball stuff he needed to do versus how much was he just working on rehab and getting back on the mound in the first place? So good question there. From John here, with the CBA negotiation starting, do you think there's a chance that deferred payroll payments could be eliminated or moderated? I do think it's going to be mentioned. It's important to point out teams like deferred money. Players like deferred money. It's mostly fans that don't. And I'm not saying that's the wrong position on it, right? I'm just saying that that's typically how it's approached. The players like it because it pushes some money into the future. It's guaranteed income when their careers end. And typically there's an interest rate put onto it, so it's worth their while financially as well. Teams like it because if you can invest well, you can make additional money. Because what you do, you don't wait 20 years to do anything with that money. If a player has deferred money for 2026, you have to put the present value of that money into an account by July 1st, 2028. And then that money is invested. And it is supposed to be the amount that's owed to the player when they're getting paid for it. And if it's not, you have to cover the difference. But if you make more than what is needed to pay the player, you can keep the excess. So in essence, it lets you loan money to a player, or I guess it's a low interest loan that you get from the player that you can then turn around and invest. Part of the reason the Dodgers are so successful with this is they're owned by Guggenheim partners who are very good at investing. And so they are aggressive with deferrals. One, because a lot of their players move out of California after retirement, and you get taxed where you get the money, not where you earned it, with deferred compensation under the IRS. So you get taxed in Florida, in a lower tax state like Florida or Texas or in Japan, where Shohei Ohtani is probably going to go back to after he retires and doesn't have to pay California taxes and all that money. I think there's going to be some effort there, and they're going to put a percentage on it. They're going to say you can't defer more than a certain percentage. There may also be some sort of approach to readjust how it's accounted for in the CBT. You don't get a CBT benefit really from deferred money, because all of that money you have to pay now into that account, that's the amount that you pay a CBT charge on. So if you're spending $46 million to fund Shohei's deferrals, you pay CBT of $46 million. So that's kind of, I think they're going to do something on it simply because it's very clear that that's a pain point for the fans, but I don't think it's a priority, if that makes sense. A couple more questions here. Joseph, this is kind of what I was trying to get to earlier in the thing here. Unpopular opinion, I don't want to add anybody else. I'm fine with rolling with what we got and adding at the trade deadline once you have a better idea of who's healthy, bounce back, or struggling. That's kind of where I am too, is you've already seen one guy go down. Don't spend money now and then not have the funds to take care of another fluke injury or an underperformance or something like that. So I kind of agree with you there. Another one from Joseph here. What happens to the existing contracts if we see major changes to the CBA? Does it hamstring the Dodgers if we get a cap, or do they get grandfathered in? Typically, when a sports league introduces a salary cap, are you good, Bandit? Are you stuck on the cord? You got it. The dog is just a lot today. It's a gradual ramp up into the cap. They don't just automatically put a cap and say nobody can go over this, but the teams that are already over are good to go. They gradually ramp up to the cap. So either they'll do something where the penalties will be less severe, or they will do some sort of system where the cap gets implemented into the future. And, because the thing here is, the players have signed contracts that legally guarantee them X amount of money. So there's really not the legal authority to just tear those up and say, oh, well, you can't have that anymore because the salary cap's in place. So they have to work around that. It would take a while. It's not like if you agreed to a cap next spring, 2027 would be played under a cap. I still think what they'll end up doing is they'll end up putting in some sort of minimum spending levels. It may not be a floor, but it may be something that replicates a salary floor. Like saying, we're going to increase revenue sharing, but you have to directly spend that amount on payroll. Right now, the rules on on revenue sharing, you have to use it to improve the major league product, not on payroll. So it can be on a pitching lab. It can be on development and coaches and all of that stuff. I think what you'll see them increase revenue sharing and make it directly spent on payroll on the bottom to replicate a floor. And then on the top, I think you're going to see them significantly increase the penalties into the top of the CBT, right? Like maybe level 1 and level 2 are just higher taxes, but when you hit level 3, rather than pushing that draft pick back 10 spots, maybe you lose it completely. Maybe it becomes like the qualifying offer, where you lose, if you sign 2 qualifying offer players, you lose 4 draft picks. Whereas you go over the first or the third CBT tier, you lose 1 or 2 draft picks. And then if you go over the next one, you lose 2 more, or you lose another years of draft picks or something more punitive like that. With the idea being, bring the teams at the top down a little bit, bring the teams at the bottom, bring them up, because you're never going to get any action against the top until you get action against the bottom. And I think at the end of the day, we're not going to get a formal cap and a formal floor, but we're going to get some things that replicate the effects of those two things, because the players are adamant they don't want a cap, and the owners are adamant that they don't want a floor. And I think at the end of the day, they'll find a middle ground on those things, right? They'll find a way to replicate the effects without actually doing it. Good question here from Skull. What do you think an Acuña contract looks like now? This is really tough because you have all of these weird, odd precedents. And the thing to remember about an Acuña extension or a new deal or whatever is anything that Atlanta does is going to be so out of character that it's almost impossible to predict, right? Because if you think about it, Ronald signed after the club options through age 30. Atlanta doesn't like to give long-term deals to anybody at the age of 30 older. They'll give them 2 or 3 years. If you're a younger guy, they'll extend you into your lower to mid-30s. But they don't want to give dudes 10-year deals who are 30, 31 years old. They just don't do that. I think, and if you look at the payroll and when some money is falling off the books, you could have a situation where Atlanta is preparing to give Ronald some sort of shorter-term, high AAV extension. And this is all speculation because, again, they've never gone over the largest contract for 1 year that AA has given is $23 million to Josh Donaldson for 2019. But if you look at how money's expiring off of payroll, Kim, Sale, Iglesias are done after 2026. That is 20, 30, 40, 48, $54 million right there. After 2027, Jurickson Profar's off the books. Ronaldo Lopez is off the books. That's another 23-something million dollars there. Is it possible that you end up with giving Ronald some sort of 4-year, $40 million a year contract? 4 years, $160 million? That would take him, that would cover his age 31 through 34 season. He would get paid. Like, it's hard to go to Ronald Acuña Jr. and offer him $40 million a year and him to say no and the fans to be mad at you for it, right? Like, maybe I'm wrong on that. But I feel like if they offer him a deal, it's going to be a shorter term deal. And you're going to have to pay more AAV. The Bo Bichette deal has shown us that. The Kyle Tucker deal has shown us that. You're going to have to give him a big dollar figure. I used to wonder if $30 million a year would do it. I don't think it does now because we've seen guys make 40s and 50s and all of that. So 4 years, $160 million. Does that get it done? I don't know if it does, but I think 4 years, $40 million a year at least gives you the ability to say, hey, we gave a legitimate effort. That would have been the largest contract by years that we've ever given to a baseball player. And if he says no, then he says no. And that's kind of where I think they'll be. Maybe they, and Joseph has a good point here. He might get 50 plus in free agency. He might. We don't know. The question will be, does he take a shorter term deal to stay in Atlanta? Does he give the Atlanta discount? I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Thank you guys for being here for the live show. I really enjoyed doing this a ton. Do me a favor. If you're listening on audio, 5-star review would be fantastic. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. We drop shorts, bonus episodes, all that good stuff. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.